I think that actually also varies a little bit from studio to studio, company to company. At Blue Sky, at least when I started, scripting was definitely something that was extremely beneficial. I think in general, scripting can be beneficial to I would say it doesn't have to be a requirement. I know riggers that don't script and they are doing fantastic work. However, then you do have to have some sort of setup that you can use some you have to use, let's say, the Maya elements in a smart way. There's not so much of an automation maybe that you could script that will help make that easier. So every single time, I was doing something that needed to be more automated, or a task that I had to repeat multiple times, you kind of want to, or I at least make my life easier when I write a script. I think generally it can be very beneficial for yourself. It also depends. In some companies, it might be a requirement. At Blue Sky, it was definitely beneficial. I also think you had more ability to then maybe become a lead. It was all a little bit more on the technical side there, but that was also because the rigging department initially at Blue Sky supported themselves with a lot of their tools. Not all of them, but a lot of their tools. That changed later in the process, and the idea was that we would have TDs, a separate department that would take care of that more. And some of the rigging TDs that were in the rigging department, we also had some shift over and go into the TD department because they were more really on the deep end technical side. For me, I would say, as I said, I'm in between, but I'm not I'm not a software developper. And that is also not something I was interested in. As I early learned at IBM, I did not think that was...
That's how we make the curves, basically, no?
Yeah, exactly. So for me, it was primarily scripting, making scripts, writing components that would make it into the auto rig, but it wasn't going all the way into... the really, we had an R&D team, they were making amazing things that were way over my head. But I would say it is all, in my opinion, it's always beneficial if you know a little bit of scripting, just because it also makes your life easier. But what I've seen at companies, even at Pixar, I think they are separating those things. So you are much, you can be, if that's how you choose to do it, you're the modeler and the rigger. So you're much more on the more, let's say deformation side of things, the creative side of things. I don't want to say, because I feel like programming is inherently creative as well, just not in the same way, but extremely creative. It can be. That's why I want to avoid doing that, saying that. But I do think, let's say, at Pixar, you're more on the deformation side of things. If you choose to do so, you don't have to, and you can be, it's just a different job description. And I think at other studios, you really don't have to script. I have, where I work now at Mikros Animation, there are also different levels of that. Some riggers are extremely versatile in it, and some are not. For me personally, I always think it can't hurt, because honestly, at some point in your life, you'll make your life easier if you can write a little automation script that saves you a lot of time.
Well, that's basically also the rollback to the education part. It's like you can maybe regret not learning scripting, but I cannot imagine you regret learning scripting. At least that's the thing. And I would say I absolutely get your answer, and I feel like it's a little bit specific, because at the end of the day, most people don't end up at Pixar or Blue Sky, and they don't have a dedicated department for that. And what I always say is if you are a great rigger, you can make stuff happening, but only if you are also a scripter, you can make a production happening. Because at the end of the day is like, if you are a great rigger, but then you have to repeat things 100 times, exporting and stuff like that, but even, or very specific rigging things, like you cannot keep up in a production that has a high iteration rate, for example. And especially if there probably will not be a specific department that will kind of code everything for you. So I think like even if you your goal is to become like DreamWorks, Pixar, or Disney, where you probably will not specifically need that skill, I think just to get there and to get like the value throughout the steps that you need go, and to become like very valuable through like the companies that will hire in between, I think scripting is, I think, one of the strongest points, especially for rigging. I don't even see that as much, for example, for lighting or something. I see specifically for rigging, but because it is so technically, and it's also so like iterational, because animators like, oh no, let's change this one, now I have to do the whole thing. So I absolutely get your point. I think it's exactly the reflection of the how bigger companies is, but until you're there, I feel like scripting is actually a great stepping stone to give you the small edge. Like you got the edge with the bird and the feather. I think scripting can be sometimes the edge is like, oh, this guy is great rigger, but he can also do like small scripts and stuff like that. And I think that's something, and that's what I basically always say is like, do how far you want, but it definitely will only benefit you to have a minimum amount of this knowledge, for example.
Yes, and I also think, it really depends. For example, if you really, hate scripting. Let's say you really hate programming, right? And you don't want to do it, but you do like rigging. Then you could, and if your goal maybe is to work on one of the, it doesn't have to be necessarily, Pixar or, Blue Sky doesn't exist anymore.
That will be hard nowadays.
Yes, very hard. But it could even be other, smaller companies that are still relatively large, but those, if you want to, for example, not script, then I think you can always also go the modeling route. Modeling and rigging can also well pair. And that can be very valid as well. So you could say, I'm more on the creative side, I do models and I rig. And that can be really, really cool, because then, you could be maybe even hired as a modeler, or some companies now are also having the facial shapes, for example, created more on a modeler's plate, but that modeler has to be more technical, because that modeler also has to maybe do some skinning and all of that stuff and use rigging tools. So that could be also another avenue of going that way. I haven't met too many riggers that really, really despise scripting to the degree that they wouldn't want to write even like a little helper script. But I have met people that really love the formation aspect of it and really like modeling, and that pairs well as well, in my opinion.
I think that's interesting, because when I was going through the journey and was thinking about like how much do I want to go the rigging route and stuff like that, I always thought that animation is actually the connection, like rigging and animation, because they're like, but which one would you say are in terms of career connection is better, rigging and modeling or rigging and animation?
Well, that's hard to say. I think it's also so up to the person and what they like. I think it's really important that what you choose is what you're really passionate about. For me, I really, early on, I realized I'm just not a really good animator. If you are a really good animator, rigging can pair well, but I would say to stay or to become and stay a really good animator, you have to animate. Animate. It's super beneficial if you can maybe do your own rigs and if you know how to do it. But I think that combination can be, as I said, extremely beneficial. It depends where you want to do it. If you want to like go to and work on feature film, 3D animated feature film, then you probably are will do nothing else than animate, I assume, because it's also highly competitive. It takes, I think, constant practice. And I think rigging is such a vast other area that combining that can be hard. I have seen it being done, but it can be hard. For me, as I said, I was not a super great animator. And I think, I'm not sure, even with practice, if I could have ever been a super great animator.
Probably.
But for me, the modeling aspect works in the sense because you also work a little bit more. One is shot production and the other is more of an asset field. So that's also, I think, a little bit of a separation there. Not that they are separate, but it's two areas, I would say. And then this asset production, the modeling and the rigging pairs well, because you can't really make a rig without a model, and you can't have a beautiful working rig without having some sort of modeling skills. However, you do need a really good rig for animation, so that can help you in your process. But I think and also as a rigger, it can help you if you know what an animator needs. But you can learn both of those things without being a specialist and pair those things.
Yeah, I think you did mention a good point, the separation between assets and shots. I think there is this line, and I mean, just time-wise, like a shots will start later, for example. So I think there is this separation, and I totally agree. I feel like modeling and rigging is actually the easier pair and like the more sellable pair. You as where this is like where you're a little bit of a jump, I feel like. And as you said, it's a very high performance skill. A good animator, you don't have to be as good as a modeler in this case, for example, as a rigger. You are listening to the 21 Artist Show, a podcast that inspires creatives to make meaningful content to pursue their passions. I'm talking with creators, artists, and engineers about their careers, lessons they have learned, and how to make an impact. I'm your host, Alexander Richter. I'm a technical director and coach in visual effects, animation, and games. For more content, go to 21artistshow.com. Enjoy the show.